is putting his life on the line for the betterment of not just the people of Burkina Faso, but all of Africa. He also has the best interests of Black Americans at hand. So my thing was, I'm not sure if he's aware of the injustices that Blacks in America still undergo over here, but I do believe if it was brought to his attention that he would be willing to help and do something about it. And I also want to raise support for him over here, amongst Black Americans. I think all Black Americans should stand with President Ibrahim Traoré 100%.
Ronnie Bo, public figure, activist, author from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, of many books including Conspiracy to Colonize Our Culture. He has written a petition to the World Court to hold the US government accountable for the crimes against humanity they have imposed on African Americans for 400 years. He wrote a letter to Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso to read and submit the petition to the UN and advocate for the rights of African Americans. We spoke in length about it in this episode.
Good, my brother. It's an honor to be on your platform to address my brothers and sisters from the motherland. First and foremost, though, I'd like to make a correction, just a little minor correction. Like, I was incarcerated with R. Kelly for 21 months in MCC Chicago between June of 2019 to May of 2021. And I was never his cellmate during that time. Now, in federal prisons like MCC and others, you are allowed to go inside other inmates' cell, to hang out with them. So, God is my witness that I did go in R. Kelly's cell, and we had talks in his cell. We had talks during the whole 21 months that we were there together. But I think a lot of podcasters and YouTubers or whatever you want to call it, I think they title me his cellmate for like clickbait, to get views. But just for the record, I was never his cellmate. We were incarcerated for a period of time, 21 months to be exact, and we did have many talks, but I was never his cellmate.
Okay, so prison mate is kind of the correct term, prison mate. Yeah.
Well, I guess you could address it like that accurately.
Okay, we'll talk about all that later on, but I feel like we should start with the most important thing, which is the letter you have written to President Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and the petition that you have written to the World Court, to the ICC, to the UN. Ronnie, I've read that thing twice. I've read the letter multiple times since you sent me. I've read the petition, and I have to say that, bro, you laid it all out, and I am really, really proud of the contents of the letter and the petition. Basically, I'll post the letter and everything, but it is a petition to submit all of the injustices that America has done to African Americans for 400 plus years. Ronnie, my question is, what is the motive? First of all, what's your inspiration behind this petition to the UN? And why do you think that Traore is the best person to address or to submit and to advocate for African Americans on behalf of all Africans?
Well, before Malcolm X was assassinated, he presented a very similar petition to the United Nations, and I believe that's why the government and other organizations wanted to eliminate him, because that petition could have leveled the playing field between African Americans and colonial powers, and not just African Americans, but it would have united all people of African descent. And for the record, I don't really want to address the motherland as Africa, because I'm aware that this land was, even before slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, and all that, the land was conquered by a Roman general named Scipio Africanus. And Africanus, the word Africa is a derivative of his name. So he named the land after himself. But I support Africa, Pan-Africanism wholeheartedly. I just think that my people should be aware of, where the name Africa came from, because it'll lead you, to and through history, so you know where you come from, and when you know where you come from, you know where you're going. Now, with regards to Malcolm X and his petition, uh, fast forwarding it up to my petition, I'm a follower of Malcolm X's teachings. Uh, I really honor everything that he stood for and what he was trying to do, for our people. So I realized that after his assassination, no other so-called black leader ever tried to do what he was doing. So I really don't take no other black leader serious, because it's like, if you knew what Malcolm X stood for and his agenda, which was the only realistic uh, solution to our problems, then why would nobody try to further that agenda and push it through? So I felt like, well, if nobody else would do it, then I would do it. So I filed the petition with the United Nations, the Vatican. The Pope received it. The Human Rights Council received it. The International Court of Justice received it. Back in, well, I sent it out at the end of February of 2023, and it was received by everyone by March 2nd of 2023. So now I'm realizing that we have what the FBI will call a black messiah on our hands, who is President Ibrahim Traoré. And I see genuine attributes in him. I think he practiced what he preached. I think he is putting his life on the line for the betterment of not just the people of Burkina Faso, but all of Africa. And I think he also has the best interests of Black Americans at hand. So my thing was, I'm not sure if he's aware of the injustices that Blacks in America still undergo over here. But I do believe if it was brought to his attention, that he would be willing to help and do something about it. And I also want to raise support for him over here, amongst Black Americans. I think all Black Americans should stand with President Ibrahim Traoré 100%. A lot of them are, not to offend my people, but a lot of them are ignorant. And ignorant just means that they're ignoring something, and they're ignoring certain circumstances. They're ignoring the fact that President Ibrahim Traoré is creating an independent environment, independent culture, an independent nation for blacks, because we've been oppressed for a long time. Like, even before Jesus, we had an African war general by the name of Hannibal Barca. And before his time, his father was in power, and Hannibal Barca went to war with the Romans. The Romans basically conquered the world, and now they disguise themselves under other countries, other titles, but the same people are still in power. The same bloodlines are still in power. And you know, when Jesus came, Jesus, who was also a man of African descent, you know, the Bible say his skin was the color of bronze, which is, you know, like in between your complexion and mine. His hair was like wool, which my hair is like wool, even though, you know, I try to keep the waves for the babes, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if you look at your hair is like wool, and Jesus,
Mhm.
the Bible said his hair was like wool. So I don't think we any have ever had any Roman or European people who hair was like wool. I think all their hair is like stringy, you know. So not to offend anybody who believe otherwise. I'm just aware of my history. I'm aware that, you know, Leonardo da Vinci actually during the Renaissance era where, you know, the Europeans was basically trying to whitewash everything. You know, all the icons of the past. They wanted to paint a picture that every great man was white. You know, including Jesus. During that same era, they took the noses off the Sphinx that revealed that the people on these Sphinx, you know, had noses similar to yours and mine. Which means they were black. But for some reason, and I know the reason, we don't have to get into that, but for some reason, the Europeans didn't want black people to know that these great people were black, because they wanted us to feel like we were always uncivilized beings that need to be governed by them. And as long as we believe that, we will allow them to control us. And as long as we psychologically envision Jesus as one of them, then, you know, subconsciously that uh, it kind of like provokes us to worship them in a sense. But if we saw the real images of Jesus, then we will identify ourselves in a greater light. You know, so just with regards to people like Malcolm X, who stood for justice, equality, and was willing to put, you know, their lives on the line for the betterment of our people. And fast forwarding to today, we have President Ibrahim Traoré. Like, I have never seen no black man, whether from Africa or the United States, with a vision like his, as articulate as he is, and with a plan that he's actually taking real progressive action, you know, towards the betterment of African people. Like with President Ibrahim Traoré, like he would even make me want to move to Africa and just to get away from, you know, what blacks go through over here in America. And even if not, you know, like I wanted to create a connection between Ibrahim Traoré and I, or not just I, but other African Americans over here, because as I previously explained, like Colombians and Mexicans, they have like cocaine and heroin cartels, right? Uh, for the record, cocaine and heroin are both natural resources. Heroin comes from a poppy plant, and they manufacture this thing and put a different name on it, and then they make it illegal so that people like me can't legally build empires on this natural resource. And then, certain people abuse these resources to make it seem like these resources are terrible, when once upon a time these same natural resources was used for meditation purposes or healing, but now with the industry that they created, it causes people like me in the environments I come from, the impoverished environments that we call the hood, the trap, the ghetto, or whatever. You know, we have kingship in our DNA. So when we come from poverty, that doesn't mean that we are just going to accept poverty our whole life. We want to live good. We want to be able to take care of ourselves, our family, and our kids. So when you put these substances in our community and we realize that we could build wealth, we can get money, we could feed our families, we could buy things, by participating in the drug trade. And with the system, it's a trap for us. It's like bait. Okay, we see it as a way out of poverty, and then once we get involved, we realize we caught up in a system, a trap to where it's like it's not set up for us to ever get out or benefit. It's set up for us to go to jail, and many of us have done life in jail just for you know non-violent crimes such as distributing these substances that they call controlled substances. And you know, in Africa there are all type of other natural resources and minerals. So if we could get away from the natural resources that they call controlled substances and ban so that only the government and the cartels could really get ahead on. For example, a lot of Mexicans open up all type of businesses and restaurants, to create generational wealth for themselves and their family off of these substances, and they get it for very cheap, manufacture it, and they sell it to us wholesale, and you know we sell it for retail, and we end up incarcerated while they build wealth, and the government even benefits off this industry financially. But my thing is, we don't have to risk our life and our freedom selling those controlled substances if we could make a connection with our brothers and sisters on the motherland and get those natural resources to where we could sell it to the Europeans and other races and cultures for wholesale or retail, and establish our own empires and create generational wealth for ourselves, legitimately. And I think that Ibrahim Traoré is on that path. And I think everybody, with the courage of a Jesus, the integrity of a Jesus, should support him like fearlessly. And, some of us might get assassinated or incarcerated because that's just how the system is set. But I know everyone is not willing to even think about putting their life on the line for certain causes, even if these causes could make things better for their kids and grandkids and the next generations, which I am, and I'm sure Ibrahim Traoré is. But it's a time and a place for everything, and right now it's the time. And the sign is that God put somebody like President Ibrahim Traoré in power, and that people like me are willing to speak out. People like me from the trap, the trenches, the ghetto. All of us are not articulate enough to express, the injustices that goes on over here in America. And all of us are not. We don't have the broad mind to, you know, realize that it's bigger than just the hood. It's bigger than just America. It's an international situation, and if we could unite and connect with our people from the motherland over here, then blacks will really be in power as we should be. All the real wealth of the world, most of it at least, comes from the motherland, Africa, the place that we call Africa. And the most influential people in the world come from America, and Black Americans to be particular. Like, for example, if somebody like Jay-Z was like had the balls to speak upon the things that I speak upon, then all Black Americans will support that. But Jay-Z is controlled by, certain people, certain organizations. Those organizations could be identified as the Illuminati. Malcolm X identified them as the Western power structure. You know, to narrow it down, I think you would just say white supremacy. And Jay Z, his wealth is, based on his connections with these organizations. So he's not willing to risk that for me or you or, the culture. But, God made people like me. And here we are. It's an honor to be right here speaking to you right now about this. And I hope this message gets to the people it needs to get to.
Oh, yes, it does. I hope the Kenyan audience and the various African audience that I have right now are listening to you loud and clear. Uh, I'll put the petition. I think if you have a link to it or anything, I can put it on the description so that everybody can read it, and the letter and everything. I'll put everything on the description. It is a very very detailed description. One thing that caught my eye, Ronnie, was police brutality. You talked about how when you were young, when you were 14 years old, you were tortured, and they applied the read technique on you, the way they do to a lot of young black people. You suffered. In fact, they deprived you food, and I mean, just tell us about that. Like these are some of the things that happen to young black men in black neighborhoods in America. I mean, just tell us all about that.
Well, yeah, the government train their detectives and FBI agents and all that psychological tactics to break people through interrogation, and some of those tactics are to deprive you of food and water. Like what they do, they would leave you in a empty cell that they call interrogation rooms, right? And most of the time you would be like chained up to something, and while you're sitting there, you just the only thing is up on your mind is like, when am I gonna get out of here? When are they gonna feed me? So what they do, they'll leave you in there for hours at a time, and then they may offer you food and say, well, look, if you just tell us this and that, you could get out of here and go home now, and we'll feed you. We'll bring you something to eat while you telling us. We'll bring you a cigarette or anything. So most people break, and they tell on themselves first of all, and they even tell on their people, their brothers, their friends. Some people even tell on their mama to get out that situation. But what I did, you know, I was always, I don't want to sound arrogant, but I guess you could say I was always a wise one. So my thing was, let me try to trick them, because I just didn't, I never could go so low to tell on my people. But it's like, if I make up something, let me see if this would work. Or sometimes they so thirsty for a case, you could get away with just making up something. I recently fooled the government, the DEA, by doing that in my federal case. They harassed me for years trying to get me to become an informant, and when they finally got me, they tried to use these same tactics as if I wasn't aware of it. In particular, I want to reveal his name in case people ever want to look this up. But in particular, there's a special agent that worked for the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration. His name was Timothy P. Gray, right? This was the agent assigned to investigate me and basically harass me, right? And he framed me in the case because he was mad that I wouldn't tell. And he was even more so upset that he thought, because I agreed, after a while I told him, okay, all right, I'll do it. And so they they had released me to set up a certain individual. So the same day that I was released, I bought all new phones because I felt like my phone was definitely tapped. And I called the individual who they wanted me to set up, and I said, "Bro, look, this is going on. The feds snatched me up. They had me for the last 24, 48 hours or whatever, interrogate me, and they say they have they've been watching us, and they have information about you and I, and they want me to set you up. So, bro, just stop whatever you're doing, and just know that they own you. They own both of us." So I didn't know that they had his phone tapped because, for one, when I first called him, I told him to call me from a phone that he never really used or whatever. And he foolishly called me from his girlfriend phone, which they also had tapped. And I didn't know this until, the discovery from the indictment came out. But, well, I kind of had a clue because maybe 5 or 10 minutes after I made the call, the DEA agent, Tim Gray, called me and said, "Look, you piece of shit. You just ruined our investigation." And I couldn't think of nothing else other than the call. So it's like, did he hear the call? And if so, how? Like, because this is a brand new phone. So I know this phone can't be tapped. And bro said, he was going to call me from a phone that he never used. So I know he wasn't stupid enough to still call me from a phone that he been using or that he connected to, because I'm telling him what's going on. You know what I mean? So that turned out to be the case. He called me from his girlfriend phone. They had his girlfriend phone tapped. And so the DEA realized that I ruined their investigation. And so what they turn around and do is they fabricate a case against me. They frame me as a member of a Chicago-based drug trafficking organization and use that to indict me. So, everything is corrupt about that system, and they target Black Americans. And this goes back to even the FBI, the CIA. Most of these organizations was started to watch, monitor Black Americans, and even back in the '60s, the FBI director J. Edgar Hoover, he put in the FBI directives, which is documented, that we have to neutralize and prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. And what they considered a Black Messiah was people like Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, that is, Noble Drew Ali, Dr. King, people like Fred Hampton. It's like those people have nightmares about people like us, because one thing they know is that no matter how much money and power that they have, you can only have a certain amount of influence. And for some reason, God bless people like Malcolm X and Dr. King with a charisma that they can never match. And even in poverty, like, people don't know that Malcolm X was homeless during the time that he was assassinated. They had bombed his house. He blamed that on the Nation of Islam, and that may be true. Uh, and so he was living out of hotels at the time, and he had no other place to go, and he didn't have no financial backing. He didn't have no real source of income. He was borrowing money from his sister to even travel to Mecca and Africa and make connections. And a person with no money. People think all power is based on money. A person like that with no money was actually, Malcolm X was actually the most powerful, not Black man, but he was the most powerful man in the world, because he made connections with the whole Muslim nation, the Islamic world, that is, and he made connections with his people from the motherland. So he had 600 million Muslims backing him. Most people didn't know that, but the government definitely knew that. And not just that, but he had African nations backing him, and he had no money. So power is not always based on money. It's about influence, your wisdom, your God-given gifts. And only God can give you that type of charisma and influence, and they know that, and they are afraid of that. So it's like, even if we could set up systems to keep these people impoverished, they could still somehow become influential enough to topple us, to take over the world. And the thing that they fear is that, when you gain support, like the support that Malcolm X gained, and you got all these people following you, they realize that they can no longer control the population like that, because people are not so whitewashed no more. They not mentally programmed to believe and think the way that they want us to think. And it's like, well, if they follow this person and his words and thoughts, soak into their mind, and they start moving and living off that, then we won't be able to control the population no more. And that's one thing that they fear.
Hey, it's your girl Kia from Traverse Culture.
And it's your boy Orino from Sell Africa to Africans. And so Sell Africa to Africans is partnering with Traverse Culture with an initiative called Journey Back to Eden, which will be from which date to which date, Kia?
December the 28th to January the 4th. That's the 7-day itinerary. And December the 28th till January the 8th is the 12th-day itinerary, with a 3-day event where we will have a business conference, a cultural exchange expo, and New Year celebration.
Yes, exactly. So this is an opportunity for you Africans in the diaspora to come back home, because we love you and we miss you. This is your home. I know it's been 400 years, but this is a good first step to get introduced to Africa through Kenya. So please come home, have fun, but mostly learn and socialize and build relationships with Kenyans. We are willing to talk. We are willing to just socialize and get to know you well, because that's the foundation of how we are going to live as Africans once we unite and we live together in future. So come home, welcome home, Karibu Kenya, and Africa is for Africans.
Man, let me tell you, what you said is not only in America, but also here in Africa. The FBI or the CIA, the Belgian government, they all conspire to, and also some coons around Patrice Lumumba in Congo. They all conspired to kill Patrice Lumumba. They all conspired to kill Thomas Sankara. But I always say, Ronnie, the more they kill us, the more we multiply, because the spirit of Thomas Sankara has embodied Traore. And if they, God forbid, if anything happens to Traore, God forbid, that spirit will just go to another person who will continue with the work. So even if they kill us, they can't kill all of us. They'll never ever kill the spirit. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that's why Jesus didn't care about death. He knew that they was gonna kill him, of course, but he knew that his spirit would live on and come upon people like you, people like President Ibrahim Traoré, people like Malcolm X, Dr. King. That was the spirit of Jesus, something that they can't kill. And you're absolutely right. They can't kill all of us. They tried it many times. They killed 60 million blacks with AIDS. When they created AIDS, they came to Africa, and even in the United States, they did these tests and these programs, and they presented it as something that would heal us and make us immune to other diseases. But they was actually injecting us with AIDS. And it killed 60 million blacks. And what was the what was the guy named Leo? Not Pope Leo, was it?
King Leopold.
King Leopold. He killed what, 10 million Africans?
Yeah, yes, 10 to 12 million Congolese people.
Is that more people than Hitler allegedly killed?
Yes, yes, yes.
So the point is, I wonder why the world focuses on what Hitler did with the so-called Jews, and nobody talks about how these people in governments, have killed way more blacks. Maybe it's because black lives really don't matter. I mean, at least to the government.
It's that, and all these things you highlight them in the petition, and you talk about Traore. Traore is basically doing what a loving, caring president should do, increasing production, chasing out colonialists out of your country, being independent, adding value to the minerals you have, owning your minerals, like and and many more, and making electric vehicles, and then now he's working on making the first Burkina Faso phone company. So all these things, he there's nothing like when you look at the developmental projects, he is doing what a president should do. He is looking out for his own country, and he believes in Pan-Africanism because he's uniting with Mali and Guinea. So, and let me tell you something, Ronnie. African leadership is poor, is bad. Most of it is bad, poor, and just corrupt. When I look at Traore, I see a beacon of hope. And I pray that he becomes consistent. And I'm happy that you're reaching out to him. Because let me tell you, he's the right person to reach out here in Africa. You won't come to my president. Trust me. You won't get anything from him. I can promise you that you won't get anything from all these other presidents. But I pray that you get the attention of Traore, and Traore will do it. I mean, I know he believes in Pan Africanism. I can feel it. Basically, when you look at him, what I mean, what do you think about that? Do you hope that he becomes more consistent? Do you hope that he doesn't, backslide to become like all these other useless African leaders we have? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that he will stay on the path that he's on. I think he's a man of integrity. And speaking of the letter I wrote him, I paid a few $100s to send that letter because with 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 the with the services that I paid for with regards to that letter, uh, it documents when it was received and who signed it. And according to the documentation, which I believe I sent you, it says that President Ibrahim Traoré himself signed off on my letter. So that was a blessing in itself. That inspired me itself that he actually received it and signed off on it himself. And I think if he actually acts on it, this will be one of the biggest strategic moves in world history for blacks because it will unite black Americans with the motherland, which is very necessary because black Americans have a voice. People like Jay-Z, 50 Cent, these hip hop artists who supposedly represent our culture. They are heard by people all over the world, not just in the United States, not just in Africa, but England, the United Kingdom, Japan, China, Russia. The hip hop culture expands throughout the whole globe, and we have a voice. And somebody from this culture needs to speak up on what's been going on in America and need to gain support for President Ibrahim Traoré. Now, I don't know your thoughts on Muammar Gaddafi, but before he died, he was trying to unite the whole Africa, under one currency, and he was trying to establish the United States of Africa. Now, the continent of Africa has 54 countries. Burkina Faso is just one, but with so many countries, it caused so much division. So if the whole continent would unite under one government or even one currency, then that will bring all the power back to the motherland. Because for one, we're all united. You can't wipe out everybody. Now you could work through certain individuals as they do. That's one of they main strategies and tactics of control, is to say, okay, well, we'll work through this individual right here because he'd be a sellout. So they work through people like Jay-Z. They know Jay-Z don't really have the balls to speak up for our culture on a global stage, you know. So even in Africa, they work through certain presidents, you know, people who could deceive the population to think that this president that we're following has the best interest of the population at hand, when the whole time the certain presidents in Africa are funded by the Western power structure, the colonizers, and because they're funded by them, they're controlled by them. So the threat to them is that, okay, well, if you don't comply with our agenda and run things how we want you to run it, then we'll take back our funding and you will have no power. And certain individuals, they are so selfish, they only think for themselves. They want the power, they want some type of control. They're not looking for the best interest of our people as a whole. So they will comply with the agenda, you know. But President Ibrahim Traoré showed, he showed by action, not just by words. You know, his words speaks volumes, and it's spreading all over the world. But he's not just a man based on words. He's a man based on actions. Now, no offense to the great, I call him the great orator, Minister Louis Farrakhan, right? But he's a prime example. He had Black America behind him. He in 1995 or 96 he orchestrated the Million Man March, and that was a very powerful gathering, one of the most powerful gatherings in world history, if not the number one most powerful gathering. But that was just a display of power, you know. And it's like, what did you do after that with this display of power? You took no action for our people, you know what I mean? However, President Ibrahim Traoré is actually not just speaking, he's taking action that we could all see, you know. And that's why, you know, people rally behind him. And that's why I think the rest of the world should rally behind him, especially all blacks, including Black Americans.
Yeah. You know, I believe that Pan-Africanism is the key. You know, Pan-Africanism is the only way we can be free. Uh, White supremacy is a global institution. We can't fight a global institution in independent groups. We need to join into one group to face a global institution that have been organized for damn near 400 years. So they're 400 years ahead. They're already 400 steps ahead. So the only way we can at least compete is by organizing and forming one global African family. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, white supremacy is a sick ideology. You know, it's no equality in that form of ideology. They really think of whites remaining supreme by any means, even if that means that they have to kill all blacks or all Asians or all Latinos. You know, they they their agenda is all about reigning supreme. Like, they don't feel successful if they can't look at a black person and say, I have more money, more power than him. You know,
Mhm.
they have they base their power and their even their confidence off things like having, you know, the Europeans have mostly all of the nuclear weapons. So they look at that as if, well, if we were ever to go to war with everybody, we have nuclear weapons. So we're supreme. We could wipe everybody out. And if certain people or certain countries and presidents don't want to follow our agenda, we could just wipe them out, you know. So we don't have to ever worry about losing power and control because they can't compete with us through war. So it's felon already. So I believe I already spoke upon uniting Africa under one government or even one currency, which would instantly dissolve this whole ideology and system of white supremacy that Brother Malcolm X called the Western power structure. So, I think it's very necessary. However, I also, for the few whites who, I mean, we also have to understand, and it's hard to come to this understanding and realization that all white people don't have a white supremacist state of mind. Like even during slavery in the United States, there was a white dude. I think his name was Joe Brown. They lynched him like they would lynch a black person because he fought for black people. And during the civil rights movement led by Dr. King, that movement thrived because of the support of white people, and I think at this time and age, yes, I support Pan-Africanism, but I think that real people with integrity and morals need to unite, not just blacks. I mean, first, absolutely, we need to focus on getting ourselves together and uniting as a people. But there are other people from other races who have good hearts, who have morals. And I think this was one of the realizations that Malcolm X came to when he went to Mecca and realized that there were white Muslims who were just as humble as him and, had hearts, had morals, didn't have a white supremacy type of mindset. And there are good people like that all over the world. So I just think that, God's people need to unite. White supremacy is evil, very evil, a thing of what we would call the devil. And we have these evil people like we have black. I mean, the first time we spoke, you revealed that blacks attacked the Israeli blacks from America who went over there to teach they philosophy basically. So we have very evil black people too, and that's what's really stopping us from uniting and establishing a, a government based on not so much black supremacy but black independence. Like a lot of our own brothers and sisters are bad apples that we need to get rid of because they are creating a lot of division themselves and preventing us from doing what we need to do to establish our independence and actually have real equality in the world.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Let's go back to the justice system, Brother Ronnie. In the petition, you mentioned the 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation. And the Emancipation Proclamation is very contradictory because it's saying slavery and involuntary servitude is abolished except as punishment of a crime. And that's where they got us. That's where, one thing about white supremacy, they never pass anything that is exclusively for black. There has to be a catch to everything they do. And that this 13th Amendment translated into mass incarceration now. So they create a problem. They pour drugs into the neighborhood. We all know the CIA did it by now. Everybody knows. So they pour drugs into the neighborhood. They jail our brothers and sisters, especially our brothers. And now 40% of prison population is black, if I'm not wrong. 40%. What do you think are some of the reforms that you would suggest, or that you advocate need to happen in the prison, in the criminal justice system?
Well, the most disturbing thing about 30% of the prison population being black is that blacks only make up 12% of the population. So you got to think that's about 88% of other races, which is the majority of the population. So it's like ironic, like how do such a small population make up the majority of the prison population? And it shows that, we are targeted. And as you pointed out, the Emancipation Proclamation basically said slavery is abolished except for a crime. So what they did was, the slave masters went from, you know, wearing white sheets to blue uniforms, basically. And what I mean by that is that all the slave masters and the slave catchers, they created these organizations like the police department, the FBI, the CIA, the DEA. And I know from experience, my own experience, the special agent for the DEA, who I mentioned, Timothy P. Gray, it's documented that he's a racist. You know, God miraculously worked to alleviate me from that situation, because on my birthday, and on May 26, 2019, May 26 is my birthday. On May 26, 2019, Timothy P. Gray, Special Agent Timothy P. Gray for the DEA, was arrested for a racist rant against a Uber or Lyft driver, right? And
Mm-hmm.
during this rant, he exposed himself as a racist. He made all kind of racist comments. He peed inside the Uber, and I had already made claims that, in my lawsuit, I actually sued them before they indicted me. My indictment was actually retaliation. It was malicious prosecution for my refusal to work for the government as an informant. And so, with Timothy P. Gray being a known, documented racist, it points out the type of people that works within the government. And trust me, he definitely not the only one. He definitely not the only one. Even to this day, when I was attacked by a black police officer, it made mainstream news, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the special agent Timothy P. Gray, with him being white and doing way worse things than the black officer did to me, no uh, mainstream media platform was willing to cover that story. So I have to get the message out through platforms like yours. And you see me on multiple other established media platforms, but I don't think you can consider none of them mainstream. By mainstream, I mean the media conglomerates like Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC. They won't cover it because they didn't want to expose the type of people that they have working in their government. And this been going on since the Emancipation Proclamation. It's like, okay, we would deceptively present that slavery is over, but now we have to do it this way to legitimize it. And so, after slavery, is like, what do you do when you just been released as a slave and under such a government? Like, how do I get my life together? How do I become independent? How do I get some type of control of my life? And most of the methods surrounding those circumstances really led to crime. You know what I mean? And one of the biggest entrapments was the drug trade, because it's like, if we put this into these impoverished communities, people who looking to food, clothing, shelter themselves and their families, they're most likely going to take the bait, especially if we put agents in the community and dress them up and make them out of give them the image of success. A lot of the first drug dealers, even the real Rick Ross, if you look at his story, he didn't even know he was working for the CIA. He was making like $1 million a day. And the rest that will make the rest of our community look up to him like, wow, how's this black man making all this money and having all this success? And that will motivate the rest of us to want to be like him and do what he's doing. The whole time he working for the government and don't even know it. They supplying him with drugs and connections to put him in power, to for one distribute these drugs and to poison our people, and also to motivate other black men to want to get involved in the drug trade, as an escape from poverty. So yeah, they're very cunning in their methods.
Man, oh my goodness. I mean, it just goes to show you that, I always say this, Ronnie. First of all, we are, again, I want to remind you that Brother Ronnie has written a beautiful, constructive, and very, 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 uh, to me, it's very, very, very amazing. He wrote an amazing petition to the UN, displaying all the injustices that America has imposed on African Americans, all the way from slavery to Jim Crow to civil rights era to post-civil rights era. He laid it all out. I'll put it on the. I just have to put it on the description. And he wrote a letter to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, and I hope that Ibrahim Traoré is able to look at the petition and act on it and actually go to the UN and advocate for African Americans. One thing I realized, Brother Ronnie, is back in the day, even in the 60s, we were like Pan-African love. Like in the 60s, every black person, be it in Africa or the African diaspora, was fighting for one thing, and that's freedom. In the 60s, most African countries got independence from Europeans. And then, of course, in America and in Europe, we had the civil rights era. And you could see Dr. King hanging out with Kwame Nkrumah, King with Tom Mboya, and Malcolm X hanging with Pio Gamapinto from Kenya. So there was an alliance. Where do you think that disconnection went? Because there is Pan-African love, but it is way less than it was back in the day. What do you think caused that?
Well, they understand the power of unity, and the method is to divide and conquer. If they had allowed that to grow or continue, then by now, the conditions would have obviously changed for not just Black Americans, but people of Africa. Like they don't even want us to speak about the motherland and the conditions in Africa. They want to create a divide to where it's like, y'all look at us as Black Americans, and we look at y'all as Africans.
Mm.
While we are all, we all come from the same roots basically, and they don't want to. They don't want a, a, a nation, a union between us. While they remain united. They have NATO. You know, England, France, the United States, they all have one common goal, one common agenda, which is to uphold white supremacy, while our goals and our motives and agendas remain divided. That's why there's 54 countries on the continent of Africa. And that allows them to stay in power, because it's like at least 80% of those countries are controlled by the colonizers, who are white supremacists. I know that Ibrahim Traoré is not the only president in Africa who's doing what he's doing, but not many of them have the same courage and audacity to do what he do and speak on what he speak on. And they know that. So it's like, okay, they feel like even if President Ibrahim Traoré comes to power, we could use one of his own brothers in Africa, another president in Africa, to go against him and bring him down. And recently, what they tried to do, they used a black war general over here in the United States to go against him, and he deceptively, went on mainstream news and tried to convince the public that President Ibrahim Traoré was engaging in terroristic activities and that he is helping ISIS basically grow. So, they already portrayed to the media that ISIS is one of the greatest threats to America. So now they're trying to tie ISIS leadership and growth to President Ibrahim Traoré so that we could see President Ibrahim Traoré as a threat. And if they succeed in convincing us that President Ibrahim Traoré is a threat, then that creates the atmosphere to bomb Burkina Faso or assassinate them, just like they did Muammar Gaddafi.
Wow. And Gaddafi was killed by, one of the people who were part of it was Obama. I mean, and Obama, by the way, I know Obama has Kenyan blood. I'm not a fan of Obama. I've never been a fan of him. So I'm telling you, man, it's always, it's always us. Even though we talk about white supremacy and everything, there has to be a sellout amongst us, and that really pains me. It pains me more than the white man, actually. It pains me more than the white man.
Yeah, well, that's another prime example. They used Obama, during his term to eliminate Muammar Gaddafi, so it don't seem like it was an issue based on white supremacy or that it had nothing to do with just racism or they didn't want it to seem like it was a United States versus Africa thing, so they used Obama. And based on my research and study, I actually liked Obama, until certain information came out. And he one of the most eloquent, articulate people in world history. I don't think no president ever was able to conduct a speech and inspire as many people as Barack Obama. And he also inspired me, and he had the support of the entire hip hop community. However, I found out that, even a decade before he even ran for office, he was in certain circles, and, they planned to put him in power at a certain time, to basically pacify Black Americans and make us think that we are making progress. To see a Black man in office, it made us think that white supremacy was over and that Black people have equality and power now. And it was all deception, and that led up to the majority of the United States is white, so that had white Americans so roused up and upset that they elected Trump, a Trump, the man who publicly makes all type of racist comments. During his whole initial campaign, he got a lot of press coverage for saying racist things about Mexicans and sometimes even Black people. So it shows the nature of people in America. They were so upset that there was a Black president that it's like, well, now let's elect somebody that's backed by the Ku Klux Klan, which he publicly was endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan and the Proud Boys and other white supremacy based organizations. But ironically, I actually like Trump. Because I think he's honest and real, and he's showing the nature of white supremacy, how people think. They feel like they can do anything, say anything, and get away with it, and he's actually doing that. However, Trump is actually he actually willing to work with certain people, because he don't really care so much about his white supremacy supporters. He care about his own legacy. He want to go down as one of the greatest men who ever lived. He arrogant like that. So, he the perfect president to put in position to basically shut down, the systems that America established, and it needs to be shut down. Everybody panicking because he doing whatever he want to do, but I don't see why Black people would be so fearful, because the conditions in America never been set for our best interest anyway. So ruin everything about the government if you could. And another thing about Trump, he recently pardoned Larry Hoover, who was known as a gang member, but I see him as the leader of a Black organization, and that's another thing that I articulated in a petition, that they give these Black organizations certain depictions, like they would call it a gang. They will even go as far as calling it a domestic terrorist group, depending on how much power you got. But Larry Hoover was inspired by people like Malcolm X, and Malcolm X, his mindset was by any means necessary, and it was about Black nationalism, and Black nationalism is about Black independence, which is about creating your own nation. Like, we want to govern ourselves. We want to police our own communities. We don't want y'all police patrolling our neighborhoods. And based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and even the Constitution, we have the right to basically govern ourselves. But most of our people are so lost, they don't even know where to start. So, I think people should go back and look up Marcus Garvey philosophy, the things that he stood for, read his books, look up Malcolm X philosophy, the things that he stood for. And that brings us to today. Malcolm X was petitioning the UN, to do the same things that I'm petitioning the UN to do today. And with regard to President Ibrahim Traoré, I think he's the only person with power and influence that could actually get that done, because by law, I can't lawfully present this petition myself. You have to be a government or some type of state official to do this. I'm disqualified for that. I'm even a felon, because of how the system is ran over here in America. But President Ibrahim Traoré could do that. And if he does that, this would be one of the most historical and beneficial moves done on the behalf of Blacks in world history.
Well, I think he knows what's happening. I think he's a very, very learned brother. I think he knows what's happening in the African diaspora, particularly the African American issue. I think he knows. If I can just assume, I think he is focusing on Burkina Faso right now, before he moves on to bigger things. But I think that, I would just suggest that, as he's also fixing Burkina Faso, because Burkina Faso has been ruined for so long, and I know that, fixing Burkina Faso might take a little bit more time. I also pray that he takes, he really pays attention, and he really raises the African American issue. And actually, he fixes Burkina Faso to a point whereby Burkina Faso can become a safe haven for African Americans, the way Ghana is doing now, and even to some extent, some companies like Traverse Culture are doing here in Kenya. I pray that he makes Burkina Faso palatable for African Americans to come and relocate and invest and travel. So I pray, I really, really pray that he listens to you and he actually heeds to the petition. Um, Brother Ronnie, that was a good petition, and I think actually my favorite line is when you put when you were, and I'm paraphrasing, you said that you feel offended using the white man's currency that your former, that has the picture of your former slave masters. I mean, you even say that you never see Jews will not allow to use a currency that has a picture of Hitler or the neo-Nazis. That was powerful. That one really caught me. That one caught me, man.
Yeah, because mental health issues are a major issue for our people. Like our people don't even realize that the dollars that we flash in music videos and glorify, have pictures of former slave owners, slave masters. Like Benjamin Franklin was a slave owner. George Washington, Andrew Jackson. Most of them were slave masters, and they are on our dollars, and we glorify it, and we don't petition against it or nothing. So I just had to make an example of that because let's say the number one currency in the world had a picture of Hitler displayed on it. Like, how will people feel about that? People don't even raise the issue that the number one currency in the world has pictures, displaying and glorifying former slave masters, people who basically facilitated the worst and most inhumane conditions in world history. I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to get into details about some of the things that they did to our people during slavery. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody knows people, were castrated, beheaded, but even with you know, the genocide aspects of it, like as far as our women, right? Like the female slaves who had unique shapes, uh, the male slaves who were masculine, they didn't care if it was brother and sister. They will force them to breed together, like how a person would breed certain dogs.
God.
One of my close friends, he breeds French bulldogs, right? And
Mhm.
you don't breed a French bulldog with a German Shepherd, of course. You know, and they use these same methods with humans. It's like I own this slave and that slave. I want to breed this slave with this slave because it will make they will produce more women with these unique shapes, and they would produce that we could that what they was doing. I don't great forcibly take advantage of them sexually. That's what they was doing with our sisters, and the men they wanted strong masculine slaves that they could use for certain reasons. So they would breed them, and that causes conditions mentally and emotionally that just ruin you. So that's why I don't judge my people. Like if you saw the news in Milwaukee every day, it's something crazy. Just the other day, well, the last couple days, there were shootouts with the police, and these are young black men, teenagers, people in their early 20s, doing this, and what will provoke them to do certain things. People will look at them and say they stupid, they crazy, or they just bad people. But you never know what somebody going through in their life. You never know how they was raised. You know, when you grow up seeing your mom or your sister or somebody get raped, or you see your brother get killed or something like that, and you don't have no guidance, you don't have no love, then it's no telling how you will grow up and come out. And you can't judge a person's actions like that because they never had love, they never had guidance. You know what I mean? And this stems all the way back from slavery. Like, you know, young boys had to see their fathers get hanged and get their testicles cut off, and they had to see their mothers and grandmothers and sisters get raped by these slave masters. You know, and that affects you. That poison, that poisonous stress gets in your genetics. And when you have kids, when you breed kids, those poisonous stress chromosomes and hormones, it it breeds into your children, and they come out mentally and emotionally disstable. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
it's still having an effect on our people now. So, you know, we can't judge the ones who make terrible decisions and do foul things because of the conditions that were imposed on us by these people who we see on our dollars. You know, the number one currency in the world. So, you know, a lot of these wars that are being fought right now is because that currency is slowly losing its power and its value. It's not as powerful as it was no more. And people are waking up and realizing that this fiat currency is not even based on anything. Like, currency was usually based on some type of natural resource, gold or something. You know, it's not based on nothing. So it really has no value other than the fact that people still accept this currency. And my point was that why would people even still accept this currency when it displays these slave owners and slave masters who did such terrible things?
Mm, mm, mm. Man, brother, we can spend the whole day talking about our plight and problems. I mean, it's too much. It's too much, but at some point it has to end. And I believe this is this petition is a really, really good initiative that you've done. Thank you so much for doing it. What I think, what is the, like, if Trump is watching you right now, and I hope he is, what would you tell him, brother Ronnie? What would you tell him?
What would I tell Trump?
Traore, Captain Traore.
Traore, well, to be honest, bro, like some leaders are leaders for a reason. And I don't think it's nothing that I could tell him. I'm sitting back watching his moves. He doing everything that I would tell him to do, and greater things that I would tell him to do. So all I would tell him is, you got my full support, and I'm willing to do whatever I could do to help and to you know, gain more support for you. That's probably the only thing that I would tell him.
Mm, mm, mm.
And
Powerful, powerful.
of course, to you know, help us do the same thing over here in the United States. Basically, that's what I wrote him about. You know, seeing his moves. You know, I'm inspired by his moves. I believe in his agenda and everything he's doing, and I hope that we could implement some of those same strategies over here in America for Black Americans.
Absolutely. So, Captain Traore, if you're listening, please, please heed to the petition, heed to the letter that our brother Ronnie has written on behalf of all African Americans, on behalf of all 40 million plus African Americans in America. As you're fixing Burkina Faso, please also look and consider to advocate for our distant brothers and sisters in the diaspora, particularly the African Americans. we can be, not even we can, we are stronger together if we unite. And so, Brother Ronnie, thank you so much for the petition. Thank you so much. Before we shift gears into R. Kelly and all that other stuff, since you underwent all of those trials and tribulations in the justice system, in the prison system, and all that, what would you? I mean, now you're out, and I assume that you mentor and you counsel, young people, especially young Black people. What advice would you give to young Black men who are engaging in, activities that they're not supposed to engage in? What advice would you give them?
Well, to be honest, it's hard. It's hard to do what I'm doing. Like, I really stopped selling drugs, and I've been selling drugs literally since I was 11 years old, unfortunately and sadly. And to refrain from that, it takes a lot of discipline, because when this is the only way you know how to make money, especially a certain amount of money, and fast, and then you try to figure something else out. You try to do things what political correct people would call the right way, and you realize that, wow, I used to make $3,000 or $10,000 a day, fast and easily, and quickly doing this. Now I'm barely making $100 a day, you know, which some people could get by. $100 a day is $3,000 a month. Some people satisfied with paying a $1,200 rent, a $400 car note, a $100 light bill, and putting groceries in the house, and having an extra $1,000 to survive on through the month. But when you go from making 3,000 to 10,000 a day, which is not a lot of money, you know, depending on who you ask. But in comparison to what common people do and how they make their money, which is to work, 8 hours per day, 40 hours a week, which is a lot of time out your day and out your life, to make what your average drug dealer would see as crumbs. It's hard. It's hard to just go from that to, something else. So I can't fault those who still sell drugs. My thing is, I hope one day that they find another way to get by. I hope that they realize that illegal substances is not the only thing that could be sold to make a lot of money. I see people making a whole lot of money doing legitimate things, selling hair products or health products or what have you, selling information, coaching, teaching people the credit system or personal finance, financial literacy. But when you wasn't taught those things, you don't understand those systems and you don't have connections. Like, that's why I want to be able to connect Black Americans with our African nation, so that we could get those natural resources for pennies on a dollar. Like, the Mexicans could get, these illegal substances for pennies on a dollar and charge us, a whole bunch of money at wholesale, and we still able to make a profit off of it. You could implement those same uh, industrial, manufacturing, wholesale, retail processes into something else. And so I just hope that, one day my people wake up and can see that and have the discipline to actually go from the streets to the executive suites.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Again, brothers and sisters, click. I'll put the link below of the petition of the letter that our brother Ronnie wrote to President Traore, urging him to advocate for African American rights and to take the petition of brother Ronnie and of African Americans to the UN, because I also like what you wrote there. You cannot take the problems of Black people to the U.S. court or to the U.S. government, because they are the perpetrators. They are the orchestrators of your oppression. How can you take your problems to them? So it needs to go to a higher level, and it will be more, like you said, it will be more powerful if a responsible African president does it. And right now, it has to be Ibrahim Traoré. So please, uh, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, if you're watching, or if anybody who knows him is watching, please, heed to the petition. And as you're fixing Burkina Faso, also fight for the rights of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora.